Today I'll be talking with Rabbi Shlomo Kory about his work as a master practitioner of NLP, and in about 3 weeks he'll be running a workshop at the place here in Jerusalem. So Rabbi, what's the program looking like here? When are you going to be putting it on, and what could people come into the program hope to get out of it?
Okay, so the program is the NLP meta model, which is a series of language patterns that the people who created NLP codified from the work of the family therapist Virginia Shatir.
Hmm.
And the basic idea behind all the patterns is that people often have false beliefs about how things run in the world or about themselves. And these false beliefs can lead them to problems in life. So the idea of the general idea of the meta model is to identify these beliefs and then challenge them. So the person all of a sudden realizes, hey, wait a minute, this belief might not be right. And if it's not
Hmm.
right, of course, then we change it. That's the
Hmm.
basic idea behind it. I find this to be in my work probably the most useful and effective pattern that there is in NLP. I use it all the time, and it really helps people to make changes.
Yeah. Well, how'd you get into NLP? How long have you been doing this work for?
Okay, I started NLP, started learning it in 1996, and the way I get into it is like this. I started teaching here in Jerusalem in different yeshivas, and the boys I was teaching had problems they came to talk to me about.
Hmm.
Not very, very serious problems like they might go to a professional therapist for, but they had problems. They were things that were blocking them from, moving forward in life, and things that made them depressed and sad. They weren't functioning well. And I tried talking to them. I was sympathetic and empathetic to them, but I didn't find I was able to really help them. So I spoke to some of my rebbeim about this, and they told me, so learn counseling skills. And I went around in 1995, 1996. I attended different courses, and they're all very good. And then somebody recommended there was an NLP course being taught at that time, and I attended that, and I really, really connected with it a lot.
Hmm.
So I decided I was going to learn that, and I studied privately with the fellow who was teaching it here. And then he said to me, "Listen, Shlomo, if you really want to learn this, you have to go take a full course. You have to be part of a group, and it has to be an official thing. You have to, you can't just learn it in a haphazard way." So I went to America. That was in 1997, and
Hmm.
I took my practitioner course. They prepare you for it like 3 months in advance. They send those times, remember, audio cassettes. So I had
Yeah,
like
yeah.
36, 38 audio cassettes. I listened to like 3 times to get at the gist of it. And then the course is like super intense. And then I went back for master practitioner a year later, same idea. And I've been doing this ever since.
So you're really invested. I mean, you're traveling all the way to the United States to do this. I mean, like, what spoke to you, the NLP?
Well, I didn't understand the question.
Well, what spoke to you that it was just like moved you to such an extent that you'll even go to you'll go to the United States. You'll take programs out there to do training. And what was it about the approach that really clicked?
Ah, that's an interesting question. I think what I liked about it was, first of all, my intuition said to me, this is it. I had sat in on many, many courses, and they were all good. Everything was
Hmm.
good, but this one just felt right. I think what I liked about it the most is it's very goal oriented. It's considered short term therapy,
Hmm.
and I just found it fascinating. First of all, the language patterns really do two parts to NLP. There's the language patterns. This workshop we're looking on the meta model. There's also a Milton model, which is a totally different set of language patterns based on they codified from Milton Erickson, the psychiatrist, late
Sure.
psychiatrist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there are also like visualization techniques, which are also very powerful. Um, what originally made NLP, it was interesting, what originally made NLP famous, I think, in its time, even though there was opposition to it, we can discuss that later if you want why, was they created a phobia model to cure phobias, which is very
Hmm.
fast. And maybe I'll just digress for a second to tell you when I
Yeah,
took
what were
my
they doing
course,
there?
I took my first course, I had been in a car accident.
Mm,
I wasn't, Baruch Hashem, I wasn't hurt. And I was in the front seat and there were two people in the back seat. Nobody was hurt, but the car was completely demolished. It
yeah,
was incredibly traumatic. We were
yeah.
driving, all of a sudden, we're in a 3-lane, 6-lane highway, and the driver said, "Oh, the steering wheel doesn't work." And he's losing steering. And all of a sudden, I see we're backwards, and this truck is coming right at us, the huge truck, and bangs us, hits us head on. We shoot off the highway, spin around 3 times. It all happened in a few seconds. I had
Yeah.
tremendous phobia of driving in cars. And we went to the NLP course, and my practitioner training, the first one, and we practiced on each other. So I said I have this
Hmm.
phobia of cars. Anyway, I got back to Jerusalem, and I got to the airport, and I got into one of these Nesher cabs, and all of a sudden I sat in the front seat. I said, "What are you doing in the front seat?" I never sat in the front seat for several years since I had this accident. Never, because that's
Mm.
where I was when the accident happened.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just sitting there. All of a sudden, he starts driving, and I had no trauma, no feeling of fear.
Hmm.
I was so happy. I said to the driver, in Hebrew, I said to him, "I don't feel my fear of cars anymore." He's looking at me like, "Who are you? What are you doing?"
He's like, well, you should. You're in a Nesher. Everyone's afraid in a Nesher.
I was I was so surprised and so
Yeah.
happy. Anyway, so part of NLP is these visualization techniques.
Okay.
The ones that are I find most effective have to do with when a person wants to make a behavioral change, how to
Mm.
visualize the new change and decide that this is what I want to do, and then sort of cement it in. And
So,
NLP,
so that's interesting. The visualization is a really cool technique, and the quite often the pitfall people fall into is that when a person visualizes a goal, the neurological processes actually make the person feel as if they achieved it and reduces incentive to actually achieve what they want to achieve. So I'd be curious, how does NLP get around that imaginary success that keeps people from actually doing it in real life?
it's an interesting question you're asking. The particular technique that I was referring to that you're kind of relating to also now, the new behavior generator, which is a relatively simple technique. I've taught in coaching courses here and I've taught that, and they liked it very much. I think maybe the way that we get around that, as you're wording it, is that after you've decided on the behavior and you've seen yourself doing it, then the last step is, when are you going to do this behavior?
Yeah.
So in other words, you're not just saying, "Oh, I've done it," but that's part of the technique.
You're
And
locking in the plan to affect the change in real life.
right,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
that's probably the way we get around it.
Yep.
Uh,
That's so cool.
yeah, I think
So
so. So
yeah, yeah. So there's the imaginary aspect, your visual imaging. What other parts of what else is NLP drawn from?
okay, the original techniques came from Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson, as I mentioned. Also, Fritz Perls,
Mm,
his work, and then Gregory Bateson was also involved. And the truth is, what they did was,
all very different characters too.
I know,
So
it's
it
very
really is
interesting.
drawing a lot of yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. You're right. You're right. It is very interesting. And actually, what I liked about the two courses I took them from the same people, was the way that they put it all together as a unit. It was really
Mm,
very organized. I'm a kind of like a procedures person. I like procedures, and NLP is very procedure oriented. I mean, obviously,
right.
you adopt when I work with people. I you know have to fit it to the person. I can't go with one procedure of everybody, but but it's still very organized and procedure oriented, and they fit all these things in a certain way. First you figure out what the problem is. They use a lot of metamol for that, And then after you got the problem and you make sure that that is the problem, because sometimes the person is not themselves is clear, then you begin to work with it, setting a solution. And that's where the visualization techniques come in, and Milton model sort of a languaging to kind of get things into past the conscious mind into the beyond the person's resistance and that kind of thing. So it's true. It does come from different sources, but they organize it in a very, very effective way.
Bateson and Eric's also very practical. Like, I mean, it's very like short-term, solution-oriented therapies. They're very effective.
Right. And as I said, that's what attracted me to it. That's one of the things that attracted me to it.
Yeah.
And also why I like doing it.
So how did that change your life? I mean, like you learned this this wonderful approach. You're bringing it back to the yeshiva. I mean, like, how did that? What changed doing all that?
I mean, in my life, you're saying?
Yeah, in your work.
It's interesting. In the yeshiva itself, when I talk to the bochum I learned with, for example, it's much more casual, much more informal. But sometimes you can I don't do visualization techniques with them at all, because it's not, doesn't fit into the base medrash. But I use the language patterns a lot to break down problems. If a person says something, he has an erroneous belief, which I would say probably most of us, if not all of us, have some erroneous beliefs in life. I don't want to say everybody, but let's say most people have somewhere. How much it interferes with their life could depend on the person. But
maybe those people who say they don't have an erroneous belief.
Oh, so that's probably the biggest erroneous belief there is. Yeah. It's true what you're saying. Very good. But with the bochum, I do this a lot. If it could be a lot of them have social problems, for example. So they have an erroneous belief about what friendship is, or how to make friends, or why people don't like them. I'll give you just one example, actually, not from the yeshiva specifically, but from a friend of mine. So we were talking one day, just, again, a casual conversation, and this fellow's a nice guy, and he has basically no friends. So it's interesting. So he said to me, he lived at the time we were talking in a building without an elevator. He was on the 4th floor. So he said to me, I know people don't, why I don't have friends? People never visit us because we live on the 4th floor. Now, that's not the reason. I can tell you the reason, but that's not important. But I'm saying that he just attributed it to this fact. So now he's not going to move forward to making friends because he figured that, this is the reason. In fact, he moved out of that building. Now he's on the ground floor, and I don't think he has any more friends.
Right.
Because that wasn't the reason, unfortunately.
He just doesn't have a reason that comforts the pain he's going through. It's like, well, you're on the ground floor now, guy. Like, well, and yeah.
And I think a lot of people develop erroneous beliefs, including myself. I've discovered my own a lot of times, because to face the truth can be very painful. So you attribute it to something else, someone else, something else, whatever it may be. And then you're relaxed, except you stay without the solution to the problem. So I think that's how I use it in the yeshiva, basically, to challenge these erroneous beliefs. And then I try to help the boys also to develop more resourceful beliefs, which is also part of this workshop. Once you've discovered what the erroneous belief is, so then you can help the person to figure out, say, what could you do to make friends? For example, with this, just referring back to this fellow I mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah. But is there a lot of just like generic skill building? Is that another part of NLP? I mean, aside from like the cognitive restructuring part, trying to get underneath those defenses, is that another aspect of the course of, great, like, now what do we do?
Can you be more specific what you mean?
Well, because sometimes it's enough just to point out and do a shift in a person's beliefs. It's not, the reason isn't because you live on the 4th floor. The reason might actually be, well, don't you notice you get a little nervous when you talk to people, and well, that might actually put people off. Well, maybe zeroing in on, well, you being nervous and sending the wrong messages might actually be the reason why you don't have any friends.
Yes.
And that might be enough. Just pointing out that and reframing the experience with a person can be enough. Sometimes plugging in well, okay, teaching people how to actually introduce themselves, carry a conversation, ask people how their day is, like actually skill building. Is that another aspect of NLP or
It is. Yes, it
okay.
definitely is. The truth is, though, I mean, you may, I don't know if you find this or not in your work as well, but I find that that's sort of where people get stuck. In other words,
Mhm,
they can hear the problem, but then to put out effort to, to make, let's say, to learn how to make friends and to go make those friends,
mhm,
maybe that's where they have difficulties in our microwave, super fast, everything's easy generation, but certain things require effort, and making changes in one's behaviors and things like that is probably one of them. It's for sure one
it,
of them.
it is the harder part you're saying.
Yeah, yeah,
No, that's
I find it
interesting.
like that.
Yeah.
Maybe interesting, I saw in the Sefer Orchos Sadikim, the Mussar Sefer, the famous Mussar Sefer, in the beginning of the Sefer is a Hakdama, an introduction. And he writes there, he's talking about changing midos, but it
Mhm,
applies to everything. He says, you need three things. You have to know your goal, what you want. You have to know how to get there, and you have to put in effort. And I find that, establishing a goal, that's not so hard. People are usually pretty enthusiastic about it. Wow, yeah,
okay. Yeah.
I want more friends. And how to get there, okay, even that's maybe a little bit less than the goal because you're inferring that there's effort. But then when it comes to the actual effort,
Mhm,
did you do this? Well, yeah, no, that's where people get stuck. I find,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the following through, motivating them. And um, I remember learning in our course, in our NLP course, there's two types of motivation. There's negative motivation and there's positive motivation. Um, Negative motivation is what inspires most people to get started. They just can't
Mhm,
stand. They're so lonely.
mhm,
Then what happens is a lot of times they'll see some progress, and people are not so unfriendly, and they may lose their motivation, and then they sort of
mhm.
stop, and then and then things don't progress, and then they give up. It can be very
Mhm.
sad
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of times that's like a lack of clarity in values. I mean, do you find that, because that's kind of where it gets hairy, where the behavioral stuff overlaps with, well, what actually you're living for, what actually turns you on, you have a passion for that you want to do with yourself.
Yeah, very, very much so. Actually, that what you mentioned now is
Mm,
another part of NLP that I really like a lot. They call it
mm,
a values elicitation.
mm,
Takes me about a good 45 minutes or so usually to do it fully with a person and just figure out what's really important to them and identify if they have certain conflicts in their values what they're getting stuck on and how to resolve
mm,
those. But you're right,
mm,
once a person knows what's important to him in life, if it becomes clearer, it's much easier to for them to correct it. You're right.
mm,
Also to have positive motivation about something, like they know what not only what they don't want. I don't want to be lonely, but I want friends. I know why they want those friends. That can be very helpful. Even so, putting out effort can be is a
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
Many people.
yeah. So you're running this course. Who's is this is for, is it for couples, individuals? Like who's the course geared for
This
that
this
you're putting
workshop we're
on?
talking about now.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Um, I would say it's really for anybody who talks to other people about their problems. It could be for parents talking to their children or relatives
Mm,
talking to their, relatives. Be friends talking to friends. Be
mm,
teachers talking to their students. Therapists who want to learn another technique, talking to their clients. It can be it's very, very effective because it's very fast and very, it
mm.
gets right down to the core right away. Coaches, and anybody who talks to people about problems, would benefit from this. They really would.
Mm.
I think, you know,
Okay.
it's for professional people, but it's also for just people in
Yeah.
everyday life. As I say, I use it in a sort of casual way with my students.
Mm, mm,
It's not a full therapy session, but it's oh, they go, oh, I never thought about it that way. That's why I don't have friends. So whatever.
Yeah.
That's a major issue I deal with in yeshivas, is social problems people have, because it's painful to be, well, all the boys went out to pizza and they didn't invite me.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a reason why, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can walk through briefly the organization. Like when people come to the workshop, what will you be moving them through? What sort of skills are they going to be exposed to and learning?
this particular workshop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I said, it's the meta model. There's several language patterns. What I'm going to do is learn the pattern. It's what it is. I'll give you an example in just a second. And then how to challenge the belief. Is how to identify the belief, how to
Mm.
challenge the belief. And then, then maybe how to help the person develop a different belief. Let me give you one example. Let's say a person says, this particular workshop, by the way, is for women only. I do for men, of course, also, but this one's for women. So let's say a person says, "Well, my husband always comes home late. That means he doesn't care about us."
Mm.
Okay, this particular belief, the category it falls into, the linguistic pattern is called a complex equivalence, which means A equals B. So a person saying, "Oh, he comes home late," equals he doesn't care about us. So the one way to challenge that we'll learn is, well, what else could it mean that he comes home late? So I'll just give you an example. It could mean 1,000 things, but it could mean maybe he's staying late at work to make extra money to cover Yom Tov expenses because he
Yeah.
cares so much about the family. He wants them to have clothing and food for Yom Tov, just as an example. What
Mm.
else could it mean? That's just one example. And then you could ask, and what I like to do is to get the person to give other answers. Well, what else could it mean?
Mm.
You know,
Mm. Mm.
sometimes people are so fixed in their belief that they can't come up with anything else. That's
Yeah.
not the standard. The standard is people usually have other beliefs, but if they get stuck, so I help them. Maybe he's staying late at work, you know, because of the reason I just said.
Mm.
Um, that's one. That's one example. Um, Another example is what we call cause effect, where people think this results in this. Um, uh, if I punish my children a lot, they'll be better children. It's a cause effect. If I punish them, it will cause them to be better children. Well, might be true, might be. But on the other hand, what else could happen if you punish them a lot? Do you know of people who punished a lot that they children did not turn out so well? You know,
Yeah.
I'm just giving you this is an example. So you're
Yeah. Yeah.
challenging the workshop will teach these participants to identify which category of belief they're hearing and how
Mm.
to deal with it. How to challenge it so the person can think it through. Is this really true?
Mm.
Because if a person grows with one of these beliefs, if they keep going with it, they might be, very disappointed uh, 10, 20 years down the line that
Right.
it didn't turn out like they expected.
They're solving the wrong problem.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
the idea of the workshop is to learn these different categories. I hope to cover all the categories, but I'll certainly cover the main ones.
Hmm.
There's 6 or 7 of them. There's
Okay.
altogether about 9, but the 2 or 3 of them are really less important
Hmm.
in everyday
Hmm.
life. But the main ones I like to cover and do that and also to practice them in the workshop itself so people get some experience. It's important to practice. When I took my course, I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I was very, very gung ho about this. I really was.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had to take a taxi from my hotel, little motel place I was staying to the place. It was about a 20-minute
Mm.
ride.
Yeah.
I used to schmooze with the taxi drivers, and I used to practice the patterns with them. You know,
Cool.
how's work? Well, it's not so good, because whatever it is. Oh, really? Well, what else could it mean? What else could it be? What else could be the course?
Right.
And I used to practice all the time with them.
Right.
And I'll tell you
Yeah.
something. I used to not like to go to weddings. When I got back from my course, I loved going to weddings. I used to see people talking and schmoozing and practicing in a casual
Yeah.
way, in a casual
Yeah, in a
way.
casual way. Yeah.
But that's how I got the hang of it, and it's important. Otherwise, you can't do it lamaisa. You can't do it with people unless you're sort of familiar and comfortable with it. So I
Yeah.
tell people they have to practice it, in this way. So I used to practice it, I used to go to simchas and practice with people, taxis, whatever it was, didn't matter. Every
Yeah.
conversation, I'm so unhappy because it's cold outside. Oh, how is the cold causing you to be unhappy? That's a cause effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
How specifically is being cold outside causing me unhappy? Makes them think. Maybe it's not the cold, whatever. Or maybe there's a solution. Maybe you have to get a better coat. I don't know, you know. So
It's
that's
encouraging people to be curious, it seems like.
sorry.
It seems like encouraging people to be curious.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, because it's a lot of times people, right, they're not thinking about their beliefs, and all of a sudden you
Mm.
waken them up, and they can be curious, like, what else could it mean? It's true. It's what you're saying. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're
Yeah.
encouraging people to be curious about their beliefs and reconsider them to see if there's another way of thinking about this thing, and maybe it's a better way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. So this is a one session workshop, or this is running for several weeks.
No, it's one
Okay.
session.
So
It's
one.
it's very intense. It requires
Mm,
people to practice afterwards. That's the only thing. Now, I will practice it. I do want to practice it during the workshop, but it's very I mean, I think anybody can understand it. I've been
mhm,
told I'm very
mhm.
clear. People tell me I'm very clear. I'm a very clear speaker, but it's all packed into one workshop.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So
Cool. So when exactly is the workshop again? The date?
it's on Tuesday, February 21st. That's Lamed Shvat. It's Rosh Chodesh at night. Rosh Chodesh Adar, in other words. Lamed Shvat
Okay.
going into Aleph Adar, Tuesday night. So it's it comes out about 3 weeks from this Tuesday, I think. What's today?
Okay.
Today's Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Sunday. Okay. So yeah, that's when it's going to be, Mitzvah Shem. And
So that sounds like it's a good place to put the bookmark. But I really appreciate you sitting down and talk with me and sharing your work and what you're doing. And it sounds like it's a really beautiful program you got together. And this isn't the only thing you do. I mean, you run a lot of different workshops, if I'm not mistaken.
right, I do run workshops. I have workshops in anger management.
Mm,
That workshop is a popular one. Basically, actually, most of the material is Torah material, but I
mm,
use NLP techniques, specifically this new behavior generator I mentioned before, to help
mm,
people see how they'll react in situations where in the past they were acting with an angry response, how they could develop a better response.
mm,
Anger
mm,
management that's a big one. Then I have another workshop in decision making, which is also a very popular one. That's a lot of NLP material, but I also bring a lot of Torah sources for that. Um,
mm, mm,
how to make better decisions. It's something that everybody really needs. Those are two very popular ones. Then I have in different communication skills. Um, I have a larger one called How to Communicate with Almost Everyone. That's 8
mm,
sessions. I didn't do it. I haven't done it since before the Corona because it was
mm,
whatever. That's also can be very popular. How people can communicate more effectively, especially now that people use so much of our communication is on telephones and telephones and WhatsApps and
mm.
emails and text messages and all these things that has become much more challenging for people to
Yeah.
communicate face to face. I gave a seminar once in one of the girls' seminaries here a few years ago, both to the students and to the teachers. They told me that these young girls, the 18, 19-year old, come, they do not know how to communicate well.
Yeah.
And I gave them a seminar in this. It is a problem. So I have that also. I might just mention for myself, this helped. I'm very passionate about that particular one. Actually, all these workshops that I mentioned, that we mentioned now, helped me a lot in my life. So I
Mm,
give them with a lot of passion because they're very meaningful personally to me. The communication, I used to be very shy and introverted, and and part of it was learning how to communicate with people.
sure.
How to say things, when to say things, to pick up cues from people. A lot of these skills, but that people used to grow up with naturally, people don't have all the time naturally. I didn't have
Yeah.
them either for different reasons,
Mm,
and I developed them.
yeah.
So those are the areas I give workshops in.
Beautiful, beautiful. How could people learn more about your work or reach out to you and contact you? What would be the best way to get a hold of you?
First of all, I have a website, nlpjerusalem.com.
Okay.
Um, and if you
Yeah,
type in,
I'll include that in the information in the text for the video, in the
thanks,
description of the
okay.
video.
I have email and phone numbers, but
Okay.
the a good place to start. I have a lot of articles there on a lot of these different topics we mentioned just now, especially in communication skills that people find interesting. Um, how, you know, uh, how to disagree with people without getting into an argument, how to avoid misunderstandings. That has to do with how abstract or specific you are. Values, as you mentioned a little while ago, pick up people's values. If I go to, let's say, for example, I want to convince you to come to a wedding with me. Let's say, I'm saying that,
It'll
let's go to
take
the
a
wedding
lot of
tonight together.
convincing.
Okay. But let's say I want to convince you, and I
Yeah,
know, for example, you like good music. Let's say you like good music.
sounds about right.
So I say, listen, Yosef, we got to go. They're having a fantastic caterer come. So that's not your value. You're not going to relate to it.
Right,
If I
right.
I can how to pick up a person's value. So if I say, listen, that there, who's going to be there tonight? Who? Avraham Fried, Mordechai ben David, and I don't know who's popular nowadays. The
Right.
Eighth Day. They're all playing there. Really? What are you telling me? Yeah, yeah. And I got us front seats. I reserved. Okay, I'm coming. But I have to know what your value is. So that's another
Right.
part of communication. Um, and then there's matchers and mismatchers. This is a great one. There's some
Mm,
people who, no matter what you say, they disagree. So you have to know how to speak to those kind of people. And there's not a shortage of them in the world,
right.
because there are levels of it. Um, I go. Did you mention you like to go swimming? Is that what you mentioned? No, somebody else told me that.
No, no, definitely
So somebody
not.
else is talking today. I go
Right. Yeah.
swimming for exercise, and there's
Okay.
one fellow in the pool. I feel so badly for him. He has no
Mm,
friends. I'm swimming there for 40 years, and he's
mm,
also there for about 40 years.
okay.
No friends. Over time, you make friends in the locker room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no friends, right?
Mm,
He is one of the biggest mismatchers I ever met. No matter
mm,
what you say, he disagrees, and
okay.
he has what to say to everybody. He's
Sure.
the
Yeah.
unofficial policeman of the pool. So
Mm,
then, like, if he would sit down and learn how to communicate with people, he would discover he could have friends. You know, that's another belief, by the way, that kind of like people have a self belief, like I can't make friends. That's a
mm,
generalization.
right.
So
Right.
we responded to that by saying, well, what prevents you from making friends? You're asking a question that makes them think. One second, I can't make friends. Well, what specifically is preventing you from making friends? And then they might say
Okay.
something like,
Yeah.
well, nobody likes me. Nobody. That's another pattern. You call the
Mm,
universal quantifier.
yeah.
Nobody. I mean, there's absolutely nobody in the entire world who likes you. Well, no, I don't
Then
mean
why am I
nobody.
talking to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But the truth is that just one point about all these patterns
Mm,
is that this belief, even a person says, well, I didn't really mean that, I meant this. But the truth is, if this is what the person says, this is how they're at least unconsciously representing it to themselves, and they're functioning with this belief, which is limiting them. So
yeah.
now you're making them aware. No, I didn't really mean nobody likes me. I meant I don't have a lot of friends. Oh, okay, but you have some friends. Yeah, I know. I've got two or three friends. So how did you make those friends? What did you do? That you
Slipping
can
into the strategizing.
right
Yeah.
exactly. Then you can
Yeah.
help them to figure out what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, whatever that kind of thing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much for talking with me
And thank
today. And
you.
It sounds like it's a worthwhile workshop. So
Thank you very
you
much,
should have a lot
Yonasan.
of success
Appreciate it.
doing that.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much.